Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for taking part. Slightly unusual circumstances that we've all gotten very familiar with by now, and it's a great pleasure to be taking part once again in the forum. I'm Gerard Baker. I'm the editor-at-large of the Wall Street Journal, formerly the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal. And we've got a particularly interesting plenary session panel today on the question of managing in uncertain times. There are many people, I think, in the world who would say that uncertain times is perfectly normal, that's managing in uncertain times is managing in any times, that we are in a period, in any business, in any global economic circumstances, always in a period of considerable uncertainty. But I think it is obviously fair to say that in the course of the last 9 months or so, we've been managing in particularly uncertain times. And I think what we want to do is get a sense from our panel what the specific challenges have been over the last 9 months. And more generally, there are, beyond the issue, obviously, the elephant in the room of COVID, the other broader challenges that I think face businesses in these days, from a couple of things we've just been hearing about, ESG, to geopolitical uncertainty, to questions about the future of global interconnectedness and accelerating technological innovation and all of those things. So we've got a great panel, and I want to get straight to them as quickly as I can. We have Stéphane Richard, the chairman and CEO of Orange, Rodney McMullen, chairman and CEO of Kroger, Sébastien Bazin, chairman and CEO of Accor, and Mark Hawkins, the president and CFO of Salesforce. Thank you all for joining me. Let me get started. So, again, the topic of the discussion is managing in uncertain times, and we have been in especially uncertain times recently. I do want to get straight in, though, if I may, into some developments in the last 48 hours or so, which have actually removed, it seems, some of the uncertainty, or at least perhaps reduced some of the uncertainty that we're all operating in. We seem to have a result of the presidential election in the United States that's still being contested by the president, but most people seem to think that uncertainty that has been around for some time has gone. And then, of course, what I particularly want to start with is this, if I may ask all of you very quickly, this news that we've just had this morning, which is obviously driving a lot of optimism in financial markets, the news about Pfizer's vaccine for COVID-19, the successful results that they've had from their latest trial, and perhaps raising the prospect of, if not the beginning of the end of this crisis that we've been living through for the last 9 months, and as Winston Churchill said, the end of the beginning. Let me start with you, if I may, Mr. Richard, if I may. Actually, let me start with you, if I may. Sorry, Mr. McMullen. We've seen this news, very good, very, very encouraging news this morning. Would you briefly give us a sense of what your planning is in terms of the imminent arrival, it seems, of a vaccine? Obviously, we know it's going to take time to roll out. But how will that affect your company, the way you are, the way you've been managing your company, the way you expect the company, the way you expect to manage the company over the course of the next 6 or 9 months or so? Give us a sense of what your planning is for handling this introduction of this vaccine for employees and indeed for your general business.
Well, health and wellness has been an incredibly important part of our business for several years. And one of the things going into COVID, one of the commitments we made was to be transparent and be there for our communities. And we've been aggressively on testing. And on the next phase, we'll be aggressively supporting our associates and the communities we operate. Obviously, incredibly great news for the whole world. And it's incredibly exciting for what Pfizer has done. And, it's all of us, we can't wait for it to get into society. Kroger will be there in terms of helping provide the vaccine to our associates and customers and the U.S. at large. So great news, and it was a great way to start a Monday morning.
If I could thank you for that. If I come to you, Mark Hawkins, just again, very briefly, how does this we've been so used for the last 9 months to dealing with this uncertainty of when we would get this vaccine, when we would start to see some opportunity to resume something like normal. How does this news this morning, do you think, change the way you look at business over the next sort of 6 to 9 months or so?
Well, the first thing I would say is I think it brings hope around the world. to a pandemic that has disrupted the world in a way that few could imagine. And so I'm very encouraged by that, and I think all of us are. I think the number one priority for us has been safety. Safety for our employees, safety for our customers, safety for all the stakeholders that we serve. And this is certainly going to be something that will be welcomed as it comes on board and scales. We've had 55,000 employees that have been working from home since March. And we have been able to pivot, adapt, be scrappy, and serve our customers and our stakeholders in that way. But I think there's not anybody that wouldn't greatly enjoy a degree of normalcy of coming back to work over time. So one of the things that we certainly will do, we have a product that we created really at the request of the governor of Rhode Island. And we heard their need, and we created a product called work.com just to simply help people manage bringing people back safely in an environment that is very uncertain and dynamic in this way. And now 36 states use this product in a way to manage their teams and to really honor safety and to bring them back during periods of change. So we'll certainly use that ourselves and certainly help support our customers in any way we possibly can. But I'm certainly encouraged.
Mr. Bazin, Sébastien Bazin, I'm sorry, I think you're here from Accor. Could you tell us what you've learned from the last 9 months and what's happened to what you think is going to change fundamentally and permanently as a result of the last 9 months?
You've learned something which is essential, is humility. You've learned to accept that there's many things you just simply did not know. So inability to forecast, inability to project yourself. You learn that you could admit in front of your team that you don't have the answer on all the questions. You've learned how to communicate even though you were in doubts and you were sharing your doubts. You've learned to be absolutely honest with a high level of ethic on trying to make sure you first protect your employees, your client, and safety first, and the business comes only third. So you've learned quite a bit about yourself as a CEO. Which is very good and very fortunate. You probably did not need a crisis to learn all this, but it's certainly welcome in many cases. And you've learned to navigate in troubled waters, and even though you did not know everything, you still needed to embark everybody on your team because they needed to see some blue sky, even though you don't know when that would be coming. And you talked about Pfizer this morning. I've been saying for quite a while now, there's a risk of being wrong for 7 months, but I told them we're not facing a financial crisis. We're facing a health crisis, and someone on the planet will find either the proper medicine or the proper vaccine. It's just a matter of timing. So and you've learned quite a bit about your own machinery because you had time to think, you had time to why not pivot, and probably have different views on your own cost, on your own team, and ability to really take that time as a credit for yourself on rethinking your own organization and probably changing for the better after the unknown is behind you. So humility, communication, and admit you don't know everything. That's what it is.
Thank you. Mr. McMullen, as a company that's obviously a bigger major retailer in North America, what are the main lessons so far? I mean, again, it's still relatively early days. What have you learned about your business, and what are the long-term lessons for you?
Well, I would agree with most of the comments that was said. Plus, one of the things that we've learned is you don't all have to be in the same spot to get decisions made, get them done fast, and incredibly agile. And I can remember certainly some of the decisions that we would have made, like on a Sunday, on Monday, we changed our mind. The one stake in the ground was always following our purpose, which is to feed the human spirit, and our values, of which a couple of our values are safety and inclusion and diversity. And we always used those as the stake in the ground. And we made decisions in terms of making sure we kept people safe, both our customers and our associates. And you just learn to move at a speed completely different than what we've done in the past. And a great example of this, if you look at our seamless business, we were growing at 30 to 50%. Literally overnight, it started growing at 100% plus. And when you look at the store teams, the supply chain teams, all the division teams, office teams, that really took all of us working as one. And I was just so proud of how everybody came together working as one. And some of the things we've self-reflected on is how do we make sure that the things we did right, we continue to do it right going in the future, because it will accelerate the benefit for our customers. It will accelerate the benefit for our associates as well.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins, you're prime so far as we speak. What are the main takeaways for you of the last 9 months or so?
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, there's a number of learnings, and I relate to a lot of the comments that have been made. I think agility, speed, scrappiness, pivoting, reimagining at a speed that is hard to imagine before reminds us of our roots as a company at Salesforce. 22 years ago, we started up in an apartment in San Francisco, California. Today, we're the fourth biggest enterprise software company in the world and the fastest growing top 5. And it's that going back to our roots of just being entrepreneurial and reimagining quickly. I really relate to the comments of how fast things were moving. I tell a little story. I remember in March when our top priority was to secure the support and safety of 55,000 employees, and we went into shelter in place very early on the West Coast of the United States, and we did it because we were following our values. And we then also had been a company of stakeholder focus since the beginning. And so when things were really unfolding at the speed of light in March and in early April, we just had to look at our values and say, okay, we're securing our employees. We have to serve our customers. Customer success is one of our top 4 values. Trust is one of our top 4 values. Innovation, equality, and related even to with the climate as well. And so during this period of incredible stress, trying to rework and reimagine and serve and care for our employees and serve millions of users, customers, we literally stood back, and in the middle of the weekends, we were up till midnight trying to secure over 50 million pieces of protective equipment because we were concerned that things were not moving fast enough to protect our medical community. And we airlifted protective equipment into New York, all throughout California, through Detroit, New Orleans. We served over 300 medical institutions in between all the other business care for our customers and our employees, trying to work with our partners, trying to make arrangements for our employees to be comfortable while they're working from home. And, taking expenses for philanthropy. We've always been a company where we have a 1-1-1 model where we gave 1% of our market value away at the time of the origination of the company. We give our employees, 55,000 employees, 7 days of paid time to care for the community. This was our time to stand. This was our time we had to make unplanned investments in Q1 to protect our employees, to protect our community, to protect our customers. And that reminded us how critical values are, and values drive value. That's what I would say. That's the most important thing I would say.
And let me flip the question around for all of you too, and ask you, starting with you, Mr. Bazin, if I may, what have you missed about what have you most missed about during the last 9 months about your business? What is the thing that has most suffered, if you like, from the constraints that we've all been operating on over the last 9 months?
My answer was going to sound bizarre to you. I'm traveling for the last 7 years, 260 days a year in all the 100 countries of Accor. So what I've been missing over the last 7 months, hugging my team members in my arms. I need physically to be with them. I need to make sure that I'm embarking them, and Mark was talking about it in terms of trust and agility for Rodney. The toughest moment of my life has been in 2 days, end of March, when we saw confinement being put in place. I had in 48 hours to furlough 280,000 people out of a 300,000 of Accor within 48 hours, and telling those guys, I have no work for them in 3 days because we're closing 4,800 hotels out of 5,000. And for a lot of them, thank God, in European Union, you had subsidies and where paycheck was actually being provided by a lot of governments. But in Chile, in Laos, in many places in Africa, that in India, that paycheck did not exist. So it was total injustice, totally unfair. Nothing they could have done about it. And as a CEO of a listed company, my sales dropped 85% in a matter of one quarter. So thank God we're being able to be agile with the board. And I basically asked for my main shareholders on the board to not pay the dividend, but to put aside $100 million only to provide basically access to medical hospital for those being impacted by COVID, and make sure they have food, because one employee of Accor is nourishing 4 in his local community. So what I've learned and what I miss is a thank you for my executive team in those countries. They have been audacious, they have been positive, they have been agile, they have been generous. You know, what I've learned the most is a lot of guys on my team, I did not expect them to be so good and so different and so strong. So I need to go back quickly as possible to tell them thank you, but be physically with them. That's what I miss the most.
Thank you, Mr. McMullen. What's the thing that you most really want to get back to normal in your business, if I may say so? Obviously, we all understand the terrible human cost, and we've all had people affected and lost people in our own companies. What, as the chief executive of your company, what's the most important thing you've lost in the last 9 months?
But the thing that you try to do is to show everybody how proud you are of them and what a great job they're doing. And most of that pride, you're doing it via video, just like this conversation. And I'm the same way in terms of I'm so used to traveling and being in our warehouses and our plants and our stores and being able to, high five people, hug people, shake a hand, where you have that direct connection to let people know directly how proud you are of all the things they've done to keep everybody safe. And I can't wait to be able to start high-fiving again, shaking hands for a job well done, where it's the physical in-person communication in addition to video. And, I'm still out in stores, but you can't travel and see as many stores. You can't have, you have to smile with your eyes versus your mouth. And it's, to me, I miss those things so much and miss those things in the community as well.
And Mr. Hawkins, briefly at Salesforce, what do you think are the big losses that you can't wait to get back?
I'm going to comment on 2 of them, but I do want to say to Rodney, we're by a hail in California today. I grew up in Michigan, and family, from my earliest memories, went to Kroger's, and they were good memories. So you guys have quite a great institution, and I just wanted to say that personally to you. I think there are 2 things for me that I would love to do and that I miss doing, is to look right into the eyes of my team in person and say thank you. Say thank you for their courage. Thank you for their commitment to our customers and to our community. And thank you for, navigating through just a time that will truly, by any dimension, be historic. And what I talked to our employees about at the beginning is imagine when you had a hard time, visualize how you want to look back on it. And I think they're going to look back on it and be very proud with their actions, because they've been serving all of our stakeholders. That's what I'm looking forward to the most. And then secondly, we have a lot of events with our customer. And we call that, some people have been to Dreamforce. It's the biggest technology conference in the world. We have world tours in different parts of the world. But you know what we call it at Salesforce? It's like a family reunion. It's a time together to be with people, to interact, to learn, to share, and to dream about the future. And I look forward to doing that in person as well.
Let's talk about technology. Obviously, we've all become even more dependent on technology, innovative technology and traditional technology in the last year. Start with you, if I may, Monsieur Bazin. What's going to continue? Here we are, we're doing this event, as we've all done hundreds of events over the last few months, on our computers, remotely. We would normally be doing this in the delightful environs of Paris and all these other places that we all love to travel to all around the world. And obviously for your business, Monsieur Bazin, that's particularly important. How much is technology going to replace so much of what what we were used to doing before this crisis, and then of necessity, we use technology to do. How much is that going to continue, and how much are we going to revert to what we used to do before?
So that's an enormous question. There's two sides on the same question. The one side I don't like, but I'm prepared for it, is a lot of business travels will be reduced by 10, 15, 20%, because large corporations are going to be asking their own employees to basically start with a digital tool. And then if there is a lead, then they can go and travel. Of course, that will happen to the extent of minus 10, 15, 20%. I don't know as of yet. But you have another side of the coin, which is extremely interesting for me, is all of us are facing one difficulty on the planet is we've been accepting the employees to work from home. And you know what? It's being very efficient, much more than we all expected. And technology-wise permitted a lot of people to be connected in 40 different thousand sites and without any firewall and security problem. At least it's being managed. My view is, thanks to technology, you're going to be able to not force all your employees to come back to the headquarters, because many of them don't want to come back to the headquarters because it's too much time and energy wasted on mass transportation. But they don't want to stay at home either because their home is too confined, too small, and with a lot of noise, and they cannot meet anybody. So there is an angle, thanks to technology, for big and large corporations like Marriott, Hilton, and Accor, thanks to the huge network we have, where I can tell you for Europe, within less than 20 minutes by car or bike from all the employees of large corporation, they have an Accor branded hotel less than 20 minutes away, in which I can basically offer them facilities, boardrooms, any rooms to be converted, access to the lobby in which they can actually physically work, no longer from home, no longer in the headquarters, but to be together and have meetings and receive someone. And I will be doing my job is to better use an existing square meters. And my job is to welcome people and to serve them. So technology will permit groups like Accor to basically reinvent a new business on finally not waiting for the guy coming from another town or another country, but welcoming those employees of your neighborhood where they're going to be truly happy and probably work even better from your facility. So that's what technology permits. And I probably did not think of it that largely 9 months ago, and that exists. So to be developed and to be basically, and for me on the phone with Rodney and Mark, please, whatever you need to actually have lesser cost on rental in all over non-America, because I'm not so strong in America, all the rest of the world, I can save you a lot of money, and all my brands I basically offer to you.
Thank you, and I'm sure Rodney will offer to supply your all your grocery needs too. Can I ask you about that, Rodney, if I may? We've again, and on the question of technology, we've obviously all become some of us were used to it before, but I think so many more people in the last 9 months have got used to having their groceries delivered and to using the various apps and all the various other technological capabilities at our disposal. Is that, and it looks like that's going to be, and you tell me, but it looks like that's going to be a permanent shift in spending, in consumer behavior. Tell us a bit about that, if you would, and how much that has changed and how much you expect it to continue to change, and indeed any other ways in which the adoption of technology that you've been doing, that you've done in the last 9 months, is going to be permanent, is going to accelerate the kind of automation of so much that we've seen in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Mark, for the kind words about Kroger. And obviously, I'm emotionally attached, so it made my day. I love the question. And everything that we can see, if you look at how the customers were changing, it really accelerated probably 3 to 5 years worth of change into 3 to 5 weeks. And what we're seeing is customers are telling us they love the flexibility of being able to have their groceries delivered. They love the flexibility of delivered. And in some cases, they still go into the store and pick it up. The thing that is kind of the common denominator is the love of food. And our customers are telling us they've rediscovered their love of food. They've rediscovered the love of being with those family members they care about. And they're finding, in a lot of cases, they're learning how to cook or learning how to cook again. All of those things, technology is kind of the glue that will hold all those pieces together and make it super simple for the customer to find a meal that they love, a meal that they're going to share with their loved ones or others, So everything we can see, the technology has just accelerated the trend that was already happening, and it will make it super easy for somebody to get their groceries. And it's so much more than groceries because, as I said before, our purpose is to feed the human spirit. And it really is, helping support people as families and coming together as families and communities. So it's exciting to see. And I think in the future, people are going to figure out what's really important in their life and making sure they invest in those things.
And Mark, you're not principally a consumer-facing business, but you are seen and very much as obviously as a technology business. And so much of what you do is revolves around the implementation of technology for companies. Again, tell us your experience of the last 9 months, either from your own internal perspective or from your client's perspective, how this enforced change set of circumstances that we've been going through, how that's changed your business from a technological perspective.
Sure. I have had the great pleasure to be in technology now for nearly 40 years. And I have to say that I feel like there's an inflection point that's happening that is really, I think, a peek into the future. And let me describe what I mean by this. And I talk to all the stratas of society because we serve all the different industries around the world. And, I see, people talk about just, thinking about how much society and humanity has been digitally enabled in the last, you pick it 8 months or so. It's really quite striking. And I'm a big fan of picking out patterns. But if you think about the number of people who do mobile banking, depositing simple things like depositing checks that they never did before that was always available. They learned how to use a digital capability like they never did before. Online e-learning, that goes without saying, that's been an exponential understanding of what could be possible there, even though it's early days. You look at telemedicine and what's happening in the digital accessibility of medicine and medical care. You look at video communications like we're having today. You look at e-pharma, you can go on and even look at e-commerce and look at the stratas of society that not only have used it for the first time, but now are super comfortable to use it nonstop. I believe this digital enablement is laying the groundwork for every business to have an opportunity in the future to really begin to see the future in a completely different way, because people are going to be more trained and able to adapt and adjust, and it makes it right for new innovation. So I believe that, we'll certainly, all of us will love coming back into offices and to be with each other, and we're gonna celebrate that around the world. But I also think there's some learnings in here, and there's some digital capabilities in here that will really accelerate us to modernize in a way that maybe we never even imagined in years gone by. That's what I believe from a more broader technological point of view. And certainly at Salesforce, we help customers, really connect with their customers in a whole new way, whether it's sales and marketing and e-commerce and community and that type of thing, and analytics and the such. But I'm talking about the broader point I think is really, really interesting from my point of view.
One concern a lot of people have that I speak to all the time is about the divergent effects of this crisis on companies. And in particular, people talk about the K-shaped recovery, that for big companies in most sectors already with strong positions, strong competitive positions in those sectors, they've been able to even strengthen that position. And that it's small businesses, from everything from the restaurant to the nail salon to the hairdresser to the small bookseller to the small retailers competing with you, Rodney, and others, they are essentially facing an incredibly bleak future, and people worry a lot about that and when we come out of this, what that may mean for competition and for small business in general. Sébastien, I know it's been a tough time, obviously, across the hospitality sector, but how concerned should we be about that we are going to see this hugely divergent set of fortunes for companies emerging from this crisis?
Some light on my face, and I'm becoming darker and darker. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't matter. Gerard, it's one thing that I've learned over the last 7 months. I've been lucky to be the coordinator for the European Commission when it comes to all the hotels, bars, restaurants. This is 3.2 million enterprises, and it is 12% of the GDP and 12% of the workforce in Europe. Out of the 27 members happen to work for the travel tourism industry. And you know what's dramatic about it? 90% of those 3.2 million companies have less than 6 employees. So it just tells you that through that meltdown debacle, probably 25% of them will not survive. And what I've learned about it, as big as Accor is, certainly in Europe, is how intertwined the relationship is between the big and the small guys. Accor will only be able to grow again if those little bars, those little restaurants, even those little hotels remain open, those little bookstores and the pharmacist and the florist. Because people who come and visit Rome or Vienna or Paris or London, they come to want to have a fun time. And you know what, Rodney, I was thinking about your purpose, feed the human spirit. He will actually be perfect for Accor as well. I need those small people to remain alive, which is why we want to help them, because you want them to be part of your experience. So, and that people tend to forget is I will never be happy on the misery of those people dying because I can't afford them to die. And I was obviously thinking when you guys were talking, we have been in a meltdown, all hospitality players for the last 7 months, so the risk of losing 70% of our sales and negative EBITDA, where I believe you and many others have been on positive territory. So we're learning different things. But the last word for me, if I may, Gerard, is I've been told early enough in April by an astronaut in Switzerland called Bertrand Piccard. You know what he said to me and to many? He says, Sébastien, a crisis that you accept becomes an adventure. And that's exactly what I'm going through. It may be a rough and a tough adventure, but of course it is an adventure, and trying to think positive about it and basically find solutions. That's where we are.
Thank you. Rodney, obviously, everybody's been very focused on the advances that Amazon and Walmart have made in particular, in retailing. And again, a lot of people express concern about what this means for small retailers, for small business generally. What's your perspective, and what's your sense of how you as a company, but how in your sector, how this will shake out after this crisis?
I think it's really important for all of us to work together and to really partner public-private partnerships. And when I think about one of the things that we've been able to do is, if you look at small suppliers, if you look at small restaurants, we've been partnering with them to sell their product. I know there's a particular barbecue restaurant where they continue to produce product. We've given them display space in about 20 stores. And each one of those partnerships, it really is at the local level and trying to find those great entrepreneurs, because I think together we will get through this, but it will take us working together. And it's one relationship at a time. But I think we will get through it and get through it stronger. But it is important to support each other.
I want to be cynical about it, but does a crisis like this just entrench the power of big companies there? And if it does, should we be concerned about that?
Thoughts on the small business situation. Certainly, this has been a challenge by any definition. What's happened with this pandemic and all the related crises. And so for every small business, my heart goes out to them. We at Salesforce, really value the small business. We love to serve the small business. We've been making during this crisis, part of our philanthropic endeavor is to make small business grants to try to help those businesses in different ways to be successful. But I would step back and share with you my own point of view that out of small businesses come medium businesses, and out of medium businesses come enterprises. And I believe that if you look back even in the 2008-2009 crisis, there were amazing companies that gave birth during that period of time, which is a very unlikely time to start up. And today have become materially important companies in the economy. So I am a huge fan of the innovation and the ingenuity of small business entrepreneurs. It's been a joy to get to know them, to watch their creativity, their adaptability. There are no doubt that there are big forces, tectonic forces that are happening in the world with the pandemic and just in general. But I'm a pragmatist optimist, and I believe there'll be a lot of good small businesses that are going to thrive, and even some that are being spun up right now. I even got exposed to restaurants that are starting up right now, which is an unlikely time. And yet, again, I think it's an amazing process of innovation, and I certainly wouldn't count them out. But I acknowledge it's a challenging time right now.
We've just got a few minutes left, and we've spent a lot of time obviously talking about COVID and its implications, but there are other issues relating to uncertainty that I very briefly want to touch on. I want to ask all of you quickly. Before this crisis came along, I think one of the big issues CEOs, senior executives were talking about a lot was the changed role of the company. That there's been a lot of attention in this country, in the United States in particular, on stakeholder capitalism rather than shareholder capitalism, and serving the interests not just of your shareholders but broader concerns in society. We've heard a lot obviously about ESG, and that's become an important factor for everybody. There's also been this, some controversy in the last year or two over some big political issues on immigration or racial issues and racial injustice issues. How much, can I just very quickly get a go around from each of you and start with you, I think maybe Rodney, if I may. How much is that now built into your role as the chief executive of a company that beyond simply looking at the bottom line or the top line, you think about your role as the contribution your company is expected to play in broader society?
Well, it's something that's been important to us for years. And one of the commitments we made several years ago is zero hunger, zero waste. So where we operate, we would work with communities to have zero hunger. As a company, we would have zero waste. So I don't look at it as an either or. I look at, we're doing things together with our associates to help take care of our customers. When we continue to grow, it gives great opportunities for our associates. And ESG has always been part of who we are and something that we've committed to. Another part on the zero waste, we also committed by 2025 to have zero plastic bags in our stores, things like that. But it's really, it was important before COVID. It continues to be incredibly important after COVID as well.
Sébastien, if I may ask you, as chief executive, as kind of social justice warrior, is that now something that's got to be part of the job too?
Yes, it is. I guess the one thing which is noticeable for me is Accor is a champion in local community. People don't realize, but we hire 60,000 new people per year. And a third of those people have no baggage, no education, no expertise. So this ability for Accor to train and build self-esteem for all those people in those local territories, this is corporate social responsibility, but this is what makes Accor a miracle. This ability to nourish ourselves from cultural differences and be present and helpful for those who actually need help the most. And that's what makes me as a CEO super proud on having all those new, and immigrants is a lot part of it. We need the immigrants to flow all over Europe because we need those jobs to be fulfilled.
Mark, your company, your chief executive, Mark Benioff, has been a notable advocate of, if you like, a kind of activist role, a social activist role for companies, for chief executives. How does that work in practice for you at Salesforce? How do you see your role in these broader questions? Again, beyond ESG and onto some of these quite controversial political issues that come up.
I would say, Jerry, a couple things here. One is that when I think about stakeholder management, as you described from 22 years ago, the foundation when we founded the company was on the principle of stakeholder management, which now is certainly a much more prevalent discussion today. But that's really an important point to call out. But I recently hosted a World Economic Forum, a CFO forum with Larry Fink, actually was my guest speaker. And we talked with a fireside chat. And I talked about, we had this dialogue about, think about the stakeholders, the shareholder, And how many circumstances have you seen a good company that's treated their shareholder well and not well? That's one data point. And with a great company, how many companies have you seen where they've treated their customer well and not well? And who tends to survive and compete well over the long term? Or hasn't treated their partners well? You can think of examples in your mind that come right away, who people have been extraordinary with their partners, and those that haven't. They've been very transactional and however, employees that, and when you think about a business and building a generational company, and you imagine companies that have done a great job for their employees and ones that haven't and have labor relations problems, which is going to create, long-term return better. Imagine the community. You can think of the companies that have struggled mightily with their community interaction, and you can see those that have prospered, which is going to create a long-term value. And even the planet. Think about those companies that have had historic problems with the environment and what they've done with the environment, and those that have been more responsible. And our contention is our stakeholders, our shareholders, our customers, our partners, our employees, our communities, and planets. When you think about serving them well, you're really talking about creating a great long-term return, a generational return for your shareholder and your stakeholders. And so I don't see a misalignment even with the Milton Friedman discussion. I see it as taking a longer time horizon to really go create something that really is fantastic for all the stakeholders, number one. Number two, what's so interesting, and I think is changing, and I don't think executives are tone deaf to this, the expectations of all those stakeholders are changing. Today's employee wants to work for a company that is responsible socially and cares about some of the stakeholders. Customers have expectations that we hear about all the time, including being ESG friendly. So we're committed to that. We're net zero greenhouse gas. We'll be 100% renewable in 2022. We're not just contemplating the issues. We're trying to act them out and deliver on them. That's the way we think about it.
And a related question briefly, we have a few more minutes. I'm sorry, there was a miscalculation on the time. So we do have a few more minutes when we have a couple of questions from the audience, which I want to get to too. But just one very quick question on related to this is we all operate obviously in this extraordinary kind of excitable age of social media. And just briefly from each of you, I wonder to what extent we've seen many instances in the last couple of years of companies getting into trouble or taking advantage of social media because of some incident or whatever that blew up on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. How important is that for each of your businesses? Now, how much time do you spend with your senior colleagues or with your staff, focusing on that or worrying about, the ability of social media to, significantly affect the value of your company? Start with you, Sébastien, if I may.
Well, it's big. It's big because brand reputation could be damaged within a couple hours on social media. So you have to pay attention. You have to be responsive. You have to play the game. Am I losing sleep over it? No, seriously. And I guess I have to confess, when my hotels are closed, there's nothing on social media about Accor, except what we do in terms of solidarity and providing hotel rooms for nurses, hospital, doctors, policemen, firemen, which is 300,000 nights over the last 2 months only. So, but no, it's all a matter of, it's a 24/7 brand reputation matter, and employees. Employees do talk a lot about on social medias, and you also have to respond to them. But it's not as critical as one could be thinking of in other businesses.
And Rodney and Mark, briefly, either of you have any thoughts on that?
No, I would agree with what Sébastien said. You're one of the things that we always try to be transparent. We try to share the things that we do. And one of the things over the last 3 years, we've provided over 1 billion meals, for an example. But you want to make sure that somebody sees all aspects of what you do and how you're working together with your team and your associates to try to make the world a better place.
Mark, anything quickly on that? What Rodney just said, I think we just look at our values and just try to, highlight, where we're trying to pursue our values and trying to interact, whether it's with the community, whether it's with customer success, innovation, equality, sustainability. But that's the way we think about it, and we certainly respect the social media capabilities, but we try to focus on our values, and that's probably the majority of what comes through with us in social media.
Quick question from the audience, and then I've got one final question for all of you. And it's about the COVID crisis. Let me ask you all, to what extent has public support to short-time working, guaranteed loans, or income replacement, how much has that proved valuable to your organization during the crisis? And would you like to have seen more? Sébastien, I'll start with you because you mentioned it briefly a little earlier. I assume it has been important to you, and we're not through this crisis obviously yet. Do you expect it to continue to be important over the next 3-6 months or whatever?
2 words: indispensable. You could not have responded without it. 2, it helps you survive. It not helps you live, and that makes a huge difference. So it's a buffer. That way it gives you the staying power. But to believe that they give you the remedies and you're actually happy to be remaining closed, it's just untrue. So they have done half the work and they could have done more, but they probably simply can't afford it. So we're still asking for more. We don't have it, but it's a long journey battle. But no, I have to be thankful for a lot of different countries, Australia, European unions. They have been there at the time it was really urgent.
Rodney, again, a lot of the measures in the US in particular have been directed at helping small businesses, and there have been some other measures too, and measures to support all everybody's income through. How important is public support either at the state or the federal level? How important has that been for you, and how important do you think it's been for the sector as a whole?
It's incredibly important for our customers. If you look at our customer base, every day we have over 11 million people come to one of our stores, and 4 million come to our website. And when you have that many customers, you have customers with every economic situation. And many of our customers have been affected by losing their jobs, or the company has had to lay off people, things like that. So for our customers, it's been incredibly important to help them stretch their food budget and to put food on their table as a family and individually. So it's been very important, and I believe it will continue to be important until the economy gets back on its feet totally.
Mark for Salesforce?
I would just say that I'm glad to see the support for society and the needs that it's filling in society that you've heard so eloquently by my fellow panelists. And so in that sense, I'm very glad to see that. This support in particular, due to the nature of my business, is not directly impacting my business, but as a member of society and as a member of the community, I'm very glad to see that. I think it's much needed. And I think this is really important where government can help in this way. And I would just add that in addition to this, I think that just listening to these great companies, that my panelists, and just watching what's happening in the world, I think in addition to what government can do, we are firm believers at Salesforce that business is one of the greatest platforms for positive change. And you're hearing it today from some of my colleagues here, just the things that we can do also to support our community, to support our stakeholders is just ever present. And I'm encouraged by that as well.
Thank you. Final question for all of you, if I may. It's a kind of broad one, and forgive me for putting it in such broad terms. But COVID has represented, I suppose, a kind of another blow to the kind of global system that we had got used to over the last 30 years since the end of the Cold War. We've had political backlash against globalization in various countries in the West, in particular. We've seen this rising tension between the US and China over the last few years. And now we get this big shock to the global system. People have talked about, completely rethinking their global supply chains, rethinking the way they work internationally, and reshoring and making sure that they have security of supply. Just give me all your brief final thoughts about on that topic, about how you think what might be the lasting consequences of this for that globally integrated economy that we got used to, or whether or not you think this will actually just prove to be a passing moment, and whether we'll actually get back towards a more globally integrated economy. And I'll start with you again, Sébastien, if I may.
Well, on this point, I'm extremely critical, to tell you the truth. I am, in terms of government officials, what they have done in many countries is totally incoherent in between different countries under the same continent. They don't talk to each other. They have different methodology, different timing. It's a mess. And you know why that is? It's because most of the governments have been managed by fear, in total despair. This is the worst ever advice to be provided to any managers. So as far as I'm concerned, you need to leave the fear away. You need not to be acting in despair. You need to be reasonably optimistic, but you need to be moving in action. You need to be daring. So I know it's easy to critique, by the way. I don't even have all the information. But looking at it, I think business people would have actually managed it very different. Whether it would have been better results, I can't say, but I'm only telling you this management by fear for me is just atrocious.
Rodney, if I may, with you quickly, global supply chains, the effect that it's had on your business, and whether or not you think that's going to change?
Well, if you look at the food, most of food is sourced locally across the world. But I think we're going to end up figuring out the best of both. So I think the global supply chain will still continue to function. I do think there'll be other things that will move closer to the usage. So we will figure out a way to manage both pieces well. And I think other companies will as well.
And Mark, I'll leave the last word to you. Yeah, I think that I also agree the global supply chain will stay in shape and it'll continue. I think there's a balancing that will happen over the next several years of dependencies and making sure that people, have a kind of a balance in that way so that the dependencies are well managed for any particular company across the globe. I do think, Gerard, to your point, I think there's an ebb and flow in history. I'm a big fan of patterns in history. This is not the first time we've seen, the rise in nationalism and the secondary effect on local economies and global economies. I do think, of taking a longer view, I think there'll be ebb and flow on this, but I think the balancing of dependencies is very, very critical. And our approach has been to, stay singularly focused on the customer as the true north, and then trying to adapt in each of the locations that we are around the world and how to best serve them in a world that is having all the effects that you're describing going back and forth. So we're very attuned to it. But I think balancing dependencies is, I think, the biggest thing.
Gentlemen, Mark, Sébastien, Rodney, thank you very much for an absolutely fascinating discussion. Managing in a time of uncertainty, as I say, maybe things getting just marginally less uncertain, but still we know how challenging these times can be. And really grateful to you for spending your time with us today. Thank you very much, and best wishes to all of you. And with that, I'll hand it back to the host.